All right, I think we're live. Who's going to be the first to chat in this session? Pretty quick. People are fast here. Like,
yo, that's a lot of people.
Yeah, people move right over. Thank you, everybody. Oh, Bird is first.
I see Bird.
I saw Bird. I see you.
Bird is first. Wow, Bird. Bird is the word. I hope everybody.
Because he's smart too. He did a period. He didn't actually type anything.
Yeah, I don't know. Is that a count? A period?
I think it counts. That's just ingenuity.
A dot. All right. All right. I hope everybody enjoyed Hammer Time, Derek. It's been a great first day. I know we had a little rough first couple, transitions, but I think we're all getting the hang of this today. And again, you use the official hashtag if you're tweeting. Try to use HandyCon 2022 so we can make sure to find your tweets and reshare them on the HandshakeCon account. All right. So our next session is a great panel. I love the panels, honestly. So today we have some really great people talking about data, market trends data, hosted by Steve Webb, co-founder of Impervious and a supporter at sponsoring this event. So thank you, Steve. I'll let you take it from here.
All right. I am, we're all co-hosting to make it easier.
Oh, it's all equal here. All right.
Yeah.
And the other Webbs, Paul Webb is in the chats.
Oh, good. So yeah, it's always good to have as many Webbs as possible whenever you're talking about the DWeb. Although I will mention it, because I'm sure Paul had the same problem growing up. We have two Bs, so I don't know if that makes it better or worse, but that's our differentiator. So I'm going to let the other guys introduce themselves. I'll just say really quickly, Mike already said I'm one of the co-founders of Impervious, and we also are related to the Gateway Registry and the Registrar, which I'll talk about later. And Rob or Colin, you guys take it from there, whichever wants to jump in first.
Hi, Colin, you go.
Hi, my name's Colin Burke. I've been involved in Handshake since fall of 2020. Was pretty new to crypto, basically brand new to crypto when I found Handshake and swallowed the pill and really went down the rabbit hole, to mix metaphors. I've been writing market analysis under a blog called BlockDomains, and am pretty active as a buyer and seller where I've communicated with a lot of you. So really excited to be here. I'll hand it over to you, Rob.
Sweet. Hey guys, I'm Rob. I'm founder of Shakestats. I've been in the space for around 2 years now, like since its inception of Handshake. Got in because my mate, he got the developers airdrop, like from that GitHub thing. And we just thought that we needed to show people some data because the market looked pretty unorganized and people didn't know how to value names. So got in from there, and I was really intrigued by the censorship resistance that Handshake provides and just the libertarian ethos. So that's why I stuck with you guys.
Awesome. Rob, you want to lead us into the first topic on marketplace?
Yeah, for sure.
I'll go ahead and share those slides here.
Yeah. Get that going. So what I wanted to focus on in the beginning is to focus on like where we are as a market right now. And first off, we have to step back and understand what the Handshake trading market is, what it is based on, and how it can grow. Okay. So I found this chart that talked about the cycle of new emerging technologies, right? So here we have like the innovation trigger, the peak of inflated expectations, trough of disillusionment, slope of enlightenment, and plateau of productivity. So when looking at Handshake, we can see quite a few of these cycles going on, but at a much smaller scale, right? So giving a little history lesson, Handshake in the beginning had quite a bit of hype because of the large institutional investors that actually invest in the protocol. So we had like all of this attention from that. There was like, I don't know how many funds, 15 funds that were like massive at the time. And we got a lot of attention from there, in addition with a lot of the false airdrops. So a lot of people were claiming back then. So I think there was the highest rate of claiming was in the beginning. And that's where people dumped a little bit. So from there, we had a bit of from that hype, we got a bit of FOMO for name trading. In addition with the scarcity that was provided, that caused some really high price action for TLDs. For example, Hub, .x, and all these other names, Wallet, they went for like 6 figures of Handshake HNS, right? Each. This was also, so this was because of the scarcity element and the FOMO element. So the scarcity element was that names were being released periodically, and it was only like, I don't know how many names per week being released. But yeah, there was a small amount. So this is what caused that little squeeze on the pricing. And then as we saw every name get released, that's why we saw the prices go down a little bit, because like there was so much supply, and also people couldn't really find the names. That's another aspect. So then we fell into the path of disillusionment for a bit. No one was really sure like what to do with these names, how to value them, things of this nature. So I remember in the beginning, people were valuing, they were thinking of these names only for the use of subdomains, really, most people. So like that's why .hub and all this stuff was going really high, because people were like, oh man, this can be like the new .com or .x. This can be the new .com yet again. And that's how people were really viewing it. English words were going, like singular English words were going hard, but not as hard as like .x, .hub, things like this. In the end, they were right though. I think .x, .hub and stuff are way more valuable, because we've seen like from the TLD staking how much passive income you can make from these. And eventually we will need to use SLDs. Anyways, so now I believe we are in the beginning of the slope of enlightenment. So what this means is we're beginning to see some actual infrastructure being created on the Handshake network. We're seeing some actual utility, and it's just the beginning. So I think a really great thing that I've seen lately, for example, is HNS chat. So if you've heard of HNS chat, it's a bit like a Telegram, but you can use your TLD, purely just your TLD alone, to log in and to text other people and things of this nature. I think that is amazing, and that actually shows real utility. Same with Namebase. They've got their little name and news thing, which is, they did it first with the logins. That was really cool. So there we can see some form of reflection in the price action late down the line for TLDs, because people will actually want to have certain names to be cooler. It's a bit like an NFT, right? So let's say, oh, okay, I've got this emoji, like a single emoji. Let's say you've got a happy face emoji. That's your login. That gives you some status. People are like, whoa, that's actually pretty cool. Think about like an Instagram username even. Like if you have a simple Instagram username, maybe like Rob, right? That'll be pretty hard to get. So that's kind of cool. And that may reflect more on the pricing later. And once we see more and more utility, that's when we're going to see high pricing and pricing that's more accurate and has more solid price floors, because it's actual usage rather than just sort of wishy-washy speculation. So I think that's where we're heading, and we're going to see that pretty soon in the next 1 year, 2 years. I have some other things to talk about, but I can give it to Colin now to add some comments.
Yeah, no, thanks, Rob. And I mean, before I'll add a little bit, but while we're on this this visual here, I'm curious, Steve, you're an expert in IO and other country code TLDs. Do you see any parallels or I guess dissimilarities between the adoption cycle for those alternate legacy extensions, and any thoughts on how that racks up against Handshake? Obviously, the utility piece is a little bit different, but just curious if you have any parallels there.
So I think that's actually a pretty good observation, right? Because especially when you think of .io and when you think of CCTLDs in general, I think there's a a direct connection with the utility, just because originally IO was not what it is now, right? Like it was not a startup focused TLD. It was not tech. It was just Indian Ocean. Like it was its original intent. And so I don't know if the curve maps directly, but I would imagine it would be very similar in terms of, and Mike could speak to this a lot better than I can because he was around in the early days of .io and .ai and, you know, and even .co when it's kind of the original intent got co-opted to be a different type of utility. And then whenever that happened, then you did see this explosion of like, oh, okay, well, cool. Now it has this use case. And then, you know, it started to build and then you have this explosion. So yeah, I think there's absolutely a connection between the legacy world and the only real difference is obviously there's significantly more names that we're dealing with now in terms of on the Handshake side, but
Sure.
I think we'll see the same thing, right? Where as more and more people find out about it and more cool things are built, we'll see different things that spur more growth in different use cases.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. That's great color. And that's a very diplomatic way of saying that Mike is older than you are. I'll just quickly hit on here, you know, for the benefit of the audience, you know, when we talked beforehand, we wanted to cover, you know, kind of the definition of the marketplace, some indicators of you know, quality in domains, and then, you know, time permitting, some category specific trends. And, you know, to the extent that folks have any questions, please drop them into the Q&A, and if time permits, we'll do our best to try to address them at the end here. I'll just really quickly hit on this chart here. I'll make the small print larger verbally up front by saying that this March column that you see on the far right, that's extrapolating March to date and assuming the rest of the month continues at the same pace, just so that we're apples to apples in this comparison. But, you know, comparing this to the chart that Rob was just walking us through, obviously it's not the exact same thing, nor would we expect it to be when we're looking at both primary and secondary sales. That being said, though, I think you do get the effect of an initial ramp up. Obviously, out of the gate, the purple bars representing primary market. There was activity right out of the gate, and the secondary market didn't really exist initially, or only existed in a very informal way. So the ramp for that has been later. You know, definitely some troughing during the second half of last year, during a period of, you know, relative malaise in the handshake market, and also more broadly in crypto, as NFTs, you know, started losing momentum, and general pricing suffered. You know, just to really quickly, this is a great example of that as well. You know, this is total sales from each of the Flamingo auctions, which, you know, that's become the most prominent live auction you know, forum within Handshake. And you can see a little bit of the same dynamic here, of course, with slightly different timing, but initial enthusiasm, a little bit of a drop off, and as I interpret it anyway, you know, a slow build back up, you know, as we see corporate investment, utility, et cetera. I'll just really quickly hit on some excerpts here from the Handshake Market Sentiment Survey that many of you on the panel, or in the audience here, submitted responses to. This captures sentiment and opinions about the ecosystem development from 80 people. Really, from a platform usage standpoint, the takeaway here is that Namebase is still king, and that I don't think surprises anybody. They're the primary on-ramp, and have continued to be, you know, the primary place where most folks go to sell names. Obviously, that is not the only option, and there's a great presentation on Shakestats earlier. I just mentioned Flamingo, which has been a great feature of the community and driven a lot of volume. That being said, though, you know, we really are in a period of name-based dominance, and with that, you know, we can move on to our next topic, and I'll just briefly lead us off here before kicking it back to Rob. But we wanted to talk about what what constitutes a good domain name. And just keeping briefly with the Handshake Market Sentiment report, and this, no better place to source knowledge than from an informed community, which I think Handshake is. Really, the story here, and I don't think this will surprise people. English language is still dominant. I on this survey treated 1L, single character domains as a separate category, but those are part of the Roman alphabet, and I think we can lump together for our discussion here. English and 1Ls carry the day. In the case of emoji and IDN, there were lots of people who were very optimistic, thought more highly of them in terms of inherent value, in terms of predictions for price increase in the future. There were a lot of people that did like those categories, emoji, IDN, which is internationalized domain name. That being said, those categories did have a lot of skepticism, or the community, I should say, had a lot of skepticism around those categories as well, or strong pockets of skepticism. If you look at the bottom of the slide, and I'll circulate these within the community afterwards, and they are part of the survey, some of the kind of inherent qualities that drive value for people, whether there was a lot, we've got a slight majority of the community that thinks they're that the price paid at the primary auction is indicative of value, and pricing for secondary sales. Brevity and recognizability, no surprise there, are the two strongest individual criteria that people thought relative to, for instance, the radio test is something that you hear a lot in traditional domaining. That was considered relatively unimportant. It could be people not knowing what that is, but pronounceability, whereas maybe that's generally considered a very important part of traditional domaining, seems to be viewed a little bit less so here. So you do have some deviations like that I think are interesting. Rob, before we ask Steve to weigh in on inherent quality from an SLD standpoint, I'll kick it over to you. I know we've talked a lot about inherent quality. What are some of your thoughts about what drives an inherent, or what makes a domain name inherently good?
Well, yeah, thanks for that. What I find in valuing a domain name on Handshake is very similar to traditional domaining. So I think about many factors. First off, I have to break it down. What's the actual, what can be the utility of the name, right? So let's say, I don't know, let's say we have something fun, like fun slash, right? Like fun as a TLD. That could be a great brandable name, for example. And I would look at that and think about the brandability of that and in what context it can be used compared to like other domains, and compare everything in the context of its category. And also think about, I know there's been discussions lately how the theory on SEO is a bit wishy-washy, but at the end of the day, SEO is better when a name is like easier to put in, and also depend in the traditional domaining system depends on what TLD it's under, things like this. But that's also another factor. Another factor is search results within Google. I think that's really important to have a look for a term, how popular that term has been over time. And I take all these in addition with a recent price action to really make a decision.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. Steve, I know you've been seeing, you've got data at your fingertips by virtue of your work and just being very knowledgeable. Can you talk about what you're seeing on the well, I guess from the SLD side, what's inherently good and what's inherently bad, as subjective as that question is. And I'll let you present in case you've got some materials you want to show.
See if it comes up. Oh, there it is. All right. All right. So I'm going to give just some really quick background on where this all comes from. But yeah, so my role on this panel is very much the SLD side, because these guys know way more about what TLDs are being sold and what the trends are there. But just very quickly, everything we're going to talk about is from the Gateway registry. So a couple years ago, we created a registry in conjunction with the former CTO of .io. So this guy named James Stevens, who before .io was purchased by Affilius, he was running .io. So he has a very battle-tested system for his registry. And so that's what had been running. And all the registrations that are tweeted at Handshake TLDs are coming from that registry. And that's where all this data is also coming from. So and if you saw my NamesCon speech or talk, whatever, this is going to look very similar because I basically ripped those up and updated them from, I think that was September. And so it's pretty wild, actually, how much has changed in a couple of months. So right now, there's roughly about 10,000 active SLD registrations, meaning they're actually live in the various root zones. They're not expired. They're not being deleted. They're actually basically OK status in EPP. And I don't have what it was back in September. I want to say it was around like 4,000. So it's more than doubled in a few months. And the 37% of those right now are .c. I think 70% or maybe even higher was .c back then. And so not only are there significantly more registrations, but it's fanning out and there's more interest spread amongst more TLDs. And just to put that in context, if you look at the new global TLD rankings, if you treated every TLD that's in our registry as one TLD, it would be a top 250 TLD, which is fairly significant. And even just if you treat .c alone, it's still a top 400. And then again, just for comparison, back in September, less than 100 TLDs had at least one active registration. Now we have almost 200 TLDs. And so again, the trend there basically is we're more than doubled in a matter of a few months. This is just really quickly a breakdown of where those registrations are in the ecosystem. What's interesting, and I'll show a graph really quickly right after this, is Pork Bun actually came live, I think, around November 1st. And informally and just pretty much publicly, we've referred to it as the Pork Bun Effect. And it's a real thing because the primary reason that things have more than doubled is Pork Bun's onboarding and then selling of registrations for the TLDs that they support. And so this is just a rough breakdown of that 10,000 active SLDs, where those are being registered currently. And then this is just a really quick graph that I was alluding to that shows for the top line is .c. I'll show in a second the most popular TLD and SLD strings. But again, everything's kind of up and to the right. And then things get a little bit crazier down at the bottom where the other TLDs are kind of battling for second place at the moment. So just really quickly, this is the current, as of at least last night, I think, or maybe this morning. I don't remember when I pulled these. The top 13, because top 10 is boring. And so why not go for 13? As you can see, and this will be a theme because they already touched on it on the TLD level, shorter is better, right? So single letter or single character TLDs are clearly dominating. And the only ones that are 4 letters or more are DeFi, Sats, and DGen. And I can hear John hopefully is in the chat right now, spreading the gospel for his TLDs. But again, the real takeaway from this is shorter is better, and .c is clearly still the runaway winner. Although I think I don't have it in this, but I think .tx is definitely, if you're talking about fastest rise, because from September, I think .tx was in the top 11, but now they're number 4. And I think they might have only had, like, they definitely had less than 100 back then. So in a couple of months, so Noel is hopefully also in the chat right now, like trumpeting the .tx gospel because he's done an incredible job. One more slide, and then I'm going to kick it back to you guys because you guys have heard enough of me talking. So on the SLD side, it's way more interesting, actually, because it's, and we'll get into this more when we talk about categories, which may or may not be the next. I'll have to just check if that's our next thing we're going to discuss. But it's very strongly crypto focused, as you can tell just by looking at these words. So, I mean, Meta, obviously, metaverse, NFT, crypto, Bitcoin. I mean, like the top 14, and again, the arbitrary cutoff, I think, was 22. I wanted top 10, but then there were a lot of ties, so I just went to 14. But the column on the right tries to compare what it looked like back in September. And as you can see, there's a lot of non-available, which means a lot of these words were not being registered nearly as prominently back then. Sex is actually kind of, I think porn was very popular, but it got displaced by sex. But the crypto ones, NFT, crypto, and Bitcoin were in the top 3, but Meta's taken over, Metaverse has taken over, which I think also probably makes sense because I'm assuming that Facebook's big foray into meta probably happened after I made those slides in September, although I don't remember the exact date. But the real takeaway again is single words, not surprising, are huge. Single characters, and I dive into that more in depth. But before I like continue to monopolize all this, do you guys have something you want to jump in on before we talk about categories, like how this relates to TLDs particularly?
No, I mean, I think you're in terms of, keywords and subject matter, I think, I couldn't agree more in terms of seeing the same story. And maybe this is a good segue into the next. It's almost been kind of comical, some of the meta TLD transactions that I know there are some money laundering or off book exchange theories happening around that. But some meta trousers selling for 30,000 HNS or whatever. I think it was meta pants actually. Sorry, I'm not British. But sorry to my British audience members. But they're outside of that, it does really seem like, the in words that are related to the industry seem to, and logically so.
Yeah, I would like to add something. Sorry, what are you saying? Anyway,
Cool.
I wanna say that seeing these trends with meta, NFT, things like this, especially in SLDs and TLDs both, just shows the market efficiency in Handshake and how that carries on with crypto and everything else. When I say market efficiency, I mean the reaction to available information. So it's very bullish to see this, right? Because people are seeing the potential usage for meta and all this stuff, and then they start valuing it. And everything in Handshake right now is just this speculative value. But that's what pushes prices up, and that's what actually may push others to bring more people into Handshake also. So very bullish.
Definitely.
Awesome. Do you want to transition into categories then?
Let's do it.
All right, let me, I just have one slide base. I don't know why I took it down because it's going to take time for me to now bring it back up. But the categories are pretty obvious based on that top list that we just showed. And it touches on what Rob just said because it's not surprising. Crypto, and this is kind of a rough breakdown. I didn't actually go through all 10,000 and try to categorize them. I think I got lazy, but I did a fairly big sample. So this is fairly representative, I think. And not surprising, crypto is far and away the leader right now in terms of what strings people are particularly interested in. And I didn't clarify this in the past slide. So those numbers I showed, that's how many unique TLDs have the exact same string for them. So if meta was 80, that meant that there's 80 instances where someone registered meta.c.nft. Whatever, right? Like it's the string itself is popular in addition to what the popularity of a given TLD is. And so that's what these categories mean. So crypto far and away is most popular, not surprisingly for anybody that's been in domaining. One words also super popular. And then single character, again, which very much correlates to what they were saying about the TLDs and what we've seen in terms of how many people are registering anything on a TLD. Like people gravitate towards that single character. And location, not super popular. Emoji, again, and again, this is, 10,000 registrations is admittedly a fairly small sample, but there just aren't a lot of cases where people are registering emojis at the SLD level, at least. And then just really quickly, this graph just shows smaller is typically better, and then the TLD, it's a no-brainer. So like the vast majority of the registrations are happening on much shorter length TLDs. And now I will finally stop yammering on and let these fine gentlemen discuss categorical information at the TLD level.
Yeah, well, hey, just actually one question, Steve. I wonder if you've noticed any, do you see people who are registering the same SLD and multiple extensions at the same time?
I mean, because so like if I don't follow the Twitter obsessively, but it is kind of, it's fun to watch, especially whenever those things happen, because you will see a run, right? Where, Bitcoin was registered a long time ago, but like on Meta, for instance, I'm sure if you looked, it's a shotgun. So it's like somebody had a great idea for a keyword they wanted to use, and then they locked up, the .c, the .1, like all the popular TLDs. And so it is very much like a shotgun approach in terms of like a few people have the idea. And then also the Twitter, I think, is almost like an echo chamber, right? So like somebody sees that somebody registered, sex.c. It's like, oh, I need to register sex.something before. And so I think there is that kind of like, it's not necessarily FOMO because it's, I think, too small of a level, but it's very, very diluted FOMO of like, oh, I forgot about that keyword. I want to get that keyword.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Rob, I know we talked a little bit before about some of the more recent trends we're seeing. I'll go ahead and pull up that chart, and maybe you can talk through a little bit of that.
Yeah, for sure. Alrighty. So what we've been seeing with categories is pretty similar to what I was talking about even at NamesCon or the last talk I had on Twitter Spaces. We've seen continuously emojis taking the forefront and actually having the most solid price floors and the most volume. We see here like most of the top names. We see a lot of the top names here are emojis, right? And this, I'm pretty sure all of this is from this year alone. But lately, we've been seeing more English words come up. So we've seen less selling action on emojis, and English words have taken a bit of a forefront. So we see here Spank has like really high HNS value. I'm pretty sure there's a startup called Spank Chain or something. They bought it for that reason. We have Silver. I'm not sure what that's for, but crazy how high it went for. And then we see Iraq, Metaverse Father. This is the first time I've actually seen the top names in a period of like a few months being English words. Last year, you couldn't have said the same. It was always emojis. That's what kicked everything off with price action also. And down here, I see a lot of trends with like city names. So I see like Cluj here. That's actually a Romanian city where I'm from. And then we have like a few more, like we had Iraq up there. And then we had like some Swiftsky. I don't know what that is, but maybe it's like from some other country. Yeah, we're seeing a bit more of this, which is really interesting to observe. I think it's because people are actually expecting adoption to come sooner, so they're looking for a bit more utility. Prior to that, no one could foresee utility because there was no HNS chat, there was no handy host, things like this. So people were just playing around with emojis as if they were NFTs because they're very easy to value. You don't need utility for that, right? All you have to do is just look at the aspects of rarity, and that's what was going hard. But now we're seeing a bit more speculation on utility, which is great.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you. I think and we've talked about this, it's possible to put a box around emoji as a category and say these are round numbers, but there are 3,500 of them total. Of that, about 1,500 don't have, gender and skin tone modifiers, and therefore more rare and distinguishable. And I think that certainty of what where the boundaries of the category are helps drive that early. And to your point now, Rob, we're seeing, people kind of shoring up with the premier dictionary words, a lot of proper nouns, things of that nature, which I really love proper nouns because it's a way to, it's goodwill that you can trade on, but generally speaking, these aren't trademarked terms. So it's less, it's not exactly squatting in that sense. I know we've had a little bit of Q&A. Steve, have you been keeping track of questions coming in? Or are there any that jump out at you that we might be able to answer?
I think we already,
do we already get everything?
Well, one question that we touched on, but we might just circle back on was where do you see utility in SLDs when TLDs are completely open? I can just give really quick. I think Rob actually kind of mentioned this at the very beginning also, is in it, like they're completely open, but only one person owns a given TLD, right? So like if you had your heart set on a particular word and somebody else owns that TLD, then obviously the next solution would be get the same keyword but on a different TLD, right? Like, so like, yes, everything is open, but you get even more options whenever you have basically an infinite namespace on both sides of the dot, is how I would think about it. I don't know if you guys wanted to chime in.
Colin?
That makes a lot of sense to me. And you know, the utility, I think as we see more immediately put to use cases, you know, somebody was talking before about getting a new subdomain and being able to use HNS chat right away. So, you know, that feedback loop gets a lot shorter, especially compared to, up to maybe a 15-day period if you're registering a TLD on the primary market. So I wonder if that instant gratification maybe helps as well.
And I think also, I mean, for better or worse, people still are like conditioned to think about domains in the traditional model. And so there is a segment of the population that is still not able to fully grasp how great having a TLD is. And so for those people, it might be like at least a way to bridge to being more introduced to just TLDs, as opposed to like if you're an old school .com domainer, maybe it makes more sense for you to get keyword.c before you're willing to jump in and like participate in the .s auction that's being done at this conference.
Sure, that makes a ton of sense. And with the most recent, about the time of the Namecheap announcement and Opera support announcement, you know, it seemed like there was a new crop of legacy domainers that started coming in, and, you know, again, just based on tweets and things like that, it did seem like the first instinct for a lot of folks was SLDs, which surprised me a little bit, but is cool to see, and I think good for the ecosystem, and, you know, maybe people branch out from there.
I had an idea. I don't know, I just want to put it out there. Have you guys ever thought of releasing like the subdomains for your TLD like an NFT release? So you have like a whitelist, you have like all this hype around it, and then some built-in utility, like for example, how NFTs are saying, oh, look at this roadmap, we're integrating with the metaverse, If you can do that and create like a whole brand about it, and then create all this FOMO that people are going to think, oh, I'm going to get whitelisted, that would be crazy. I think that would like be so cool to see, and it would really help bring in higher pricing in the HNS market. That'll be sick. So
I can tell you, I mean, we're about to run out of time, but we have some really cool ideas for .forever. So like .forever is, as you know, I mean, like it's at the SLD level, it's on the Ethereum blockchain. At the TLD level, it's on Handshake. But we have some cool ideas involving a lot of the things you're talking about. So, and we're going to talk about that stuff in more detail in a later session, like I think either tomorrow or the next day. But yeah, I totally agree with you. Because
can't wait.
I want
to see that.
I think just in general, my takeaway from that comment is we just need to be doing a lot more cool shit, right? Like I think all the speculation stuff is awesome. All of the activity at the SLD level and the TLD level is amazing, but we need a lot more developers, and not even just developers, but just idea people that are like, hey, I want to do this really cool thing in a decentralized way. Like, help me do it. Because the community is very open. As anybody knows that's ever been in our Telegram, like, you will get whatever help you need. Everybody's willing to chip in. We just need more people that are willing to do what Rob just did. Like, hey, I've got a cool idea. Like, let's go do it. And then I think ultimately we will get where we're trying to go. But
yeah, so true, and I'm really excited. Can't wait for more people to do that.
Well, everybody make sure you get on or listen to Steve's next session, and I think we're about to get the hook here.
We are going to get the hook, but this was great. I'm glad we did this, guys. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you for listening as well.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, there's Mike. He's muted though.
Sorry, default.
We're getting all these emojis though. Look at this. Look, we're getting hearts.
People
And,
are loving it. I think people love, there's a hardcore community here. So thank you, everybody. I really enjoyed this too. Thanks for all the charts and the data. I think it's exactly what a lot of us were hoping for. And I know there's other sessions. I think Steve, you'll be on another session tomorrow, talking about, or maybe on day 3 about the.
On day 3, we're actually going to talk to. So I mentioned, the top TLDs. 3 of those owners will be on that panel, so they can tell you exactly what they did to get this passive income that they're generating.
Yep. All right. Thanks, everybody. We're going to move to, I think, Matt Zipkin's up next. I know a lot of people like him in the communities and give some good insights and tech tips for everybody. So thanks for tuning in, and see you in the next session, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Kinetic is a blockchain crypto investment firm based in Hong Kong and Puerto Rico. Founded in 2016, they were the first fund in Hong Kong and one of the earliest in Asia. With a portfolio of over 220 companies, they were seed investors in such projects as Ethereum, Parity and Polkadot, Solana, FTX and of course Handshake and Namebase. Founder Johan Chu is an active investor and supporter of the Handshake ecosystem. Over 100,000 domains, co-founder of DWeb Foundation, co-founder of HandyCon, and sponsor of the Handshake House at Miami Hack Week 2022.